Hey podcast fam, Colin here. Look, the audio on this episode is a little messed up and that completely falls on me. I didn't have the microphone right in front of Joe when we were recording with him, and so I apologize that the audio isn't as great on this episode as it has been on others. We're over a year in on this podcast and we are still figuring things out, so thank you for bearing with me. I apologize that the audio is not as great as it should be, but the episode with Joe is great. The interview was awesome, and I hope you enjoy it. So thanks for listening. You are listening to WHOA Podcast, coming to you from Gainesville, Florida.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the WHOA GNV Podcast, the podcast bringing you businesses and individuals that make you go, whoa. I like that.
That was good.
That one felt good. My name is Colin Austin, and my guest co-host today is the highly demanded COE of New Scooters for Less, the chief of everything, Michael Dees. What is up, man?
Not much, man. I'm becoming a regular now.
I know. I love it.
Regular status.
Yeah, it's good.
Crazy. No,
it's
what's
good.
up, man?
I
Good
like
morning.
your bold shirt.
Hey, playoffs, it's playoff season.
Yeah.
I rep.
Yeah. Joe, do you have any favorite teams? What's your favorite teams? Athletic teams?
I'm really a Gator fan.
That's it, Gators.
Pretty much.
That's the one and only. Yeah. Well, you guys, let me introduce to you our guest today. I am so excited that he is here. We have Joe Cirulli, owner and founder of Gainesville Health and Fitness. I know how to say the word Gainesville, guys. I've been here for 19 years. And you guys, he has focused his life on two things: helping people become healthy and building a company culture that inspires people to become the best. His clubs rank globally in the top percentile for sales, management, and community service. Joe, thanks so much for being here, man.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. This is going to be exciting. This is somebody that I think if you're in the Gainesville entrepreneurial scene, you admire from the outside in for so long, and then when you get to actually meet Joe, you're just like, wow, he's really cool. and there's this false perception sometimes, and I think it's just in business in general, that, man, like, this person's really big and I'm never going to be able to talk to a person like that or sit down with a person like that or just be in a network with a person like that. And I've had lunch with Joe, and I mean, I just that time was so valuable to me. And I know you're a busy guy. I don't have time to carve out time for every single request, but you definitely go out of your way to try and do what you can, and including being here on this podcast. So thank you so much for doing that.
Very welcome.
It's exciting. So you guys, we're going to get into Joe's story, and I have a bunch of questions for him. But before we do, I want to today is May 13th, and I want to remind everybody, today is the last day to sign up for the WrapSpot giveaway. WrapSpot is our first sponsor, and if you don't know already, because we've only said it a million times, go get signed up to win this wrap. WrapSpot is giving away a vehicle wrap. It's a $2,500 value, and what you have to do to get entered is to go to WHOAGNV.com, click giveaway, and then there's just a little form on there, and you just register to win, and that's it. And we're going to be giving it away this Friday, May 17th, my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So definitely go get signed up. Today is the last day, and I just want to thank WrapSpot again for giving us that. It's been awesome. We've had a lot of entries, building up a lot of awareness, for this podcast. And we're going into episode 53. It's year 2, baby, and I'm just super excited for everybody who has just jumped on board and supported this podcast for the last year. I cannot wait to see what God does with this thing over the next several years. It just, I get goosebumps thinking about it. So, world, thank you so much for your love. And I do want to give out, I had on the form, and I've said this before, but on the form it says, hey, if you go follow the WHOA GNV on Instagram, Facebook, you follow me on Instagram, there's like six things that you have to do. And if you do that, then I'm going to give you a shout out. And I got one shout out to give today to Alexis Gill. Thank you so much for the love and the support. You are awesome. And that's it.
Thanks, Alexis.
Ready to get into it?
Let's
got
go.
questions?
No, let's go. I'm ready.
Let's go.
I'm pumped.
So, Joe, now I know that a lot of people have heard your story, and it's a fascinating story, and I want to hit that because we always hit the origin story. But then I have some really great questions that I want to get into. So why don't you give us the solid version of your Gainesville Health and Fitness story, and we'll take it from there.
Well, I don't know when the story actually began. I didn't know when the story actually began until once I was at a conference, and it was back in 1985. And at the conference, the people who were putting on the conference came up to me at 5:30 to tell me they just found out the keynote speaker wasn't going to show up. And they asked me if I would give the keynote. And I said, like, what do you want me to talk about? And they said, well, just talk about how you got into the business. And so I said, okay, but let me get away from here for a while so I could think about how it all began. And when I went back and I started really thinking about it, I realized it all started when I was 7 years old. And it was because of a mother who was a nurse who used to always tell me as a little kid, he goes, just remember, as long as you got your health, you got everything. She told me that all the time. And it really sunk in because it got me watching TV, watching exercise shows on TV. It got me to want my first set of weights, which I got when I was 9 years old. And when I looked, that was really the beginning because I started bringing my little friends into the cellar, teach them how to lift weights. Eventually, in high school, I brought my whole football team. I started teaching, not in my cellar anymore, but through the YMCA, teaching them how to lift weights all the way to coming to visit somebody in Gainesville and needing a place to work out. I was here for 30 days. And the girl I'd come to see had a brother who was a member of the Steve Spurrier Health Spa, and I asked if I could go work out with him. And when I was done, and I did obviously, when I was done, I went to the manager, told him I was in town for 30 days. I didn't have any money to be able to pay to work out, but I'd be willing to work for free if he'd let me work out for free. So that 30 days was the beginning of my entire career, and that was when I was 19.
Isn't it fascinating to look back at that time now?
Oh yeah, because you realize there's little moments in time that if that thing didn't happen, that wouldn't happen. If that didn't happen, that would have never happened. And you realize there's an entire correlation to everything that occurred in your life with just little moments in time. So that was one.
Now, I know for a while, were you living out of your car, if I recall correctly?
Well, see, the first 5 years I was in the business, I worked for 6 companies that went bankrupt. I lived in closed down buildings, I lived in health clubs I worked in, I lived in my car. But I never wanted to get out of the business because every time a business went bankrupt, I'd say, I know a year's worth of that stuff now, and if I quit now, I'll lose that entire year. Then I'd work for another one. It would go bankrupt. I say, now I got 2 years. And if I quit now, I'll lose all 2 years of the knowledge that I gained. And when I was 21, I knew what I wanted to do. So I still had to work for more clubs that went bankrupt, but it was okay. I just dealt with it at the time. It didn't matter. And I read books all the time about people, how all the things they went through, and I'd be reading about people's lives and saying, man, what they went through was a heck of a lot worse than what I'm going through. And I just knew what I wanted. So it just eventually got to the point where the 6th guy went bankrupt. And I just looked at it, I said, maybe now is my opportunity. So I took over that bankrupt club. And that club was being kicked out of that location because the landlord, or the previous owner, hadn't paid rent and some other issues. So I eventually found a location. That was about a 3-month story I won't tell you about. I finally found a new location, and I signed a lease when I was 24 that obligated me to $168,000 in rent, and I had at that point I had a check for $6,700. One bank had given me a loan for $6,700 because I owed them $3,300. They gave me a loan for $10,000, and so I had to give the landlord of the current location I was in $1,200 to stay for 3 more weeks. I signed a lease for the $168,000. I had to give them $3,800 of it, and I started the health club with $1,700, but nobody knew I had only $1,700. So I hired everybody to build it, and I knew that you could advertise and not have to pay for that for 30 days. So I advertised like crazy.
That's incredible.
And somehow every week I had enough money to keep paying those contractors to come in for another week, and I'd give them half their money. I'd say, come back next week, I'll have the other half. And somehow every week I had the money to pay them.
What year was that?
That was in 1978.
What ways were you marketing? Like when you had the...
It was television, radio, newspaper, because that's what it was. And but like I said, I knew you didn't have to pay the bill for 30 days. So I figured I could maybe generate enough memberships and all to keep it going. So by the time I even got to that point, I'd be able to pay the bill. And I always was. Somehow I always was. But I had complete confidence. I never doubted that I could do it. And so I was fortunate. It worked all the way through.
I mean, were there any days where, I mean, you never doubted, but like, you're like, this is due tomorrow? Where's this money going to come from?
Well, the one thing you do is when you're in a situation that you work about 18 or 20 hours a day, to figure out ways to do it. And I was always able to figure out a way. I mean, I say during the extra, 5 or 6 hours I could sleep. You usually stay awake thinking, but I never had fear that I couldn't do it. It doesn't mean you don't have to be thinking and thinking and thinking. It doesn't mean you have some anxiety, but you know that you can do it in the end. And I had no doubts I could be. Well, I guess the reason I had no doubts is there was no plan B. That's all there was. And there was nothing else I wanted to do. So I knew I had to make it work. And remember, I had 5 years of experience of watching other people. And one thing that I am good at is watching other people, the good, bad, and the ugly. And even for people who are not like good managers that I work for during those periods of time, I would still say there's got to be something good they do. I got to just watch and pick up the something good they do. I mean, I grew up in a really good family, so I knew the bad things you didn't do. But it's amazing how many people who maybe who manage business, and this is not a wholesale thing, but there's people who will do things to cut angles, cut things short, and I just learned, from that. But I also realized I learned a lot of things well before that. I mean, I learned some really good qualities from my parents, which was working hard and being honest and those kind of things, which are critical, in business. And because that you can't ever grow a business unless people can trust you. And the only way they can trust you is if you keep your word all the time. But when I, look back, I could remember, the first year I was in the business, I worked for 11 different managers. I mean, the first thing you learn is don't become the manager. But probably one of the guys that made the biggest impact on me was my manager for 3 hours. And I learned something from him that when I was 20 years old, I said, that is really cool. And it had to do with a guy, and I could never remember his last name. I remember his first name was Peter. And I'd only been in the business now for a couple months. And he came in. He had just come in from Salt Lake City because the company that bought the Steve Spurrier Health Spa was out of Salt Lake City. And they brought him in to be the manager. And when he came in, he introduced himself to me. He asked me if I'd give him a tour, and I did. And as I was giving him the tour, he was actually showing me how to give a better tour. And I thought, this is really cool. He's never even been here before, but he could tell me how to give a better tour. And I looked at it positively, not negatively. And when he was done, he went in and he met with the owners of the company. After about 2.5 hours, he came out. And he comes over to me. He goes, Joe, can I talk to you for a second? I said, sure. He goes, Joe, you're new in sales, right? And I said, yes. He goes, and they gave you goals, right? And I said, yes. And if you accomplish the goals, they give you a bonus. I said, yeah. He goes, did you accomplish it? I said, yes. He goes, did they change the bonus? Did they lower the bonus after you hit it? And I remember saying to him, yes, but I can still do okay. And he looks at me, he goes, okay, I'll see you in just a few minutes. He left, goes back in with those guys, comes back out, sits down with me. He goes, Joe, I just want you to know it was really nice meeting you. He said, but I just resigned. He said, I would never work for a company that promised something, and when you deliver it, they change their promise. And he said, I'm going back to Salt Lake. And as he was walking out the door, I said, that is really cool. I thought, I will never make a promise to somebody that I don't plan on keeping. And I said, I will think through any promises I make in business, but even if I think through it and then later I realize I made a mistake, I said, I'll still do whatever it was I said I'd do. And it was just one of those simple little lessons that he just brought to the forefront. And so just little things like that is, how you learn.
Yeah, it's amazing how little things like that stick with you for so long. So then all of a sudden we had this giant company. Like fast forward. So I mean, when did you start your Gainesville Health and Fitness Center? You said that was 78?
1978.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 1978. And then, you have bills coming in. You're like, I know I got 30 days to get this paid. Boom. I mean, how long did it take before you were like, okay, we've really got something here?
Well, I always thought we had something
From the very beginning.
From the very beginning.
Oh, and real quick, I mean, you said you didn't have a plan B. Like, I mean, as an entrepreneur, do you recommend having a plan B, or
No, I recommend not having a plan B.
just
Yeah.
this is it?
Too
We're
easy.
gonna make
when
it.
when things get real hard, you stop and go to plan B.
Okay.
If you have no plan B, you have no choice, and you'll figure out a way, to make it work. But like I said, I learned how to make, bring in revenue from like nothing, and so as it grew, then we grew. I'd look at situations, I'd say now is the time. And one of the things is I never had fear of growing. When we had an opportunity, I grew. And because I knew I had to get big. Now, sometimes, in business, you can be motivated. One of the greatest motivators is fear, right? So, motivators that somebody's bigger and better is going to come into town, and I got to get bigger and better before they come into town. So that always inspired me. Take the next thing, do the next thing, do the next. And I never worried about the money. When I tell you I never worried about the money, I never worried about the money. I can give you a good example. It's something I just learned. I've learned over the years, and that is when you start with nothing, and you probably know this, you risk everything, right? Now, you know what happens to people, they'll start with nothing, risk everything, now they got something, and now they start avoiding risk, because now they got something to lose. And
But isn't that just because there's so much more? Right? I mean, you have so much more riding on your shoulders at a larger stage. Like now you have team members, and you have team members' families. Like, isn't that the pressure that we feel? It's like, okay, I'm not going to go and I'm not going to risk all of that.
Well, I think that's the reason why you do risk, because sometimes when you don't risk, that's the beginning of the end. And so I just learned that as the business became more successful, as I had more. The big fear could be, don't risk it, you could lose it. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example, though, and that was Tioga, the facility out there. I looked at that and thought, that's going to cost $4 million to do that. This was back in 2006. And then I started looking, I said, wait a minute, I'm starting to think like I don't ever want to think, which is I'm afraid of losing it. And as soon as that thought went through my head, I said, okay, let's go. Let's move forward. Let's go do it. As I'm telling you, I'm not talking about risk, like stupid risk.
Right.
I'm saying the fear of growing your business because you've got something to lose because you got something, instead of what can we gain by doing it, and what can you lose by not doing it. Because I could look at it and say, well, another facility could go in, and I got a lot of people who are members out there, and all of a sudden I could lose all those members. So no, I'm going to do it.
Okay, with Tioga, when you got to that point, like that was the second location?
No, the women's club was the second
on 43rd.
but this was years and years later.
Okay, when you get to that point where you're like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Like, how much time was spent in? I can hear that, feel that reaction, be like, oh, I'm doubting myself. Like, I just need to do this. But how much time did you really spend looking at, like, all right, am I cannibalizing by people? I mean, I know like they can go to whichever, but like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, how much time was spent in like calculating, hey, is this worth it?
Yeah, minimal amount of time, because I was looking way before anything was built out that way. I was looking at all the gas lines, water lines, pipeline, everything was being put in heading west on Newberry Road. So I looked and I said, well, if they're doing that, they're planning on the city growing out there. Now, the irony to us, we opened in 2000. We opened in 2007, and then the whole recession hit.
Yeah.
When I figured all this development is going to go on, so that kind of like slowed the growth, but it didn't slow us. And we just kept working on trying to make it better. Now you look out there and there's a phenomenal amount of growth. that's taking place out west. And so it was the right thing to do, but I knew it was the right thing.
But do you even let things or the possibility of things like that slow you down? Like, I mean, even right now, I would say right now, there's a lot of discussion about, oh, what's going to happen in the economy? Like, we're on the verge, we're on the bubble, everything's going to pop. Like, you know, and you hear all this stuff. Like, as an entrepreneur, do you just like have to put it out and just keep going and just like don't even let that affect your decision making, or should you? Like, should you?
Well, you just have to be able to think through those situations when they happen. I give you the example, which is 2007. You know, I mean, we still had two big, you know, the big club and the women's club, and I met with my staff. I said, look, I mean, my top management. I said, here's the deal. We're going to get hit by this recession, just like everybody is going to get hit by this recession. I said, so what we need to do is we need to figure out how to cut costs in every way that a member will never see. And so we started looking at how we set up payroll, how the different supervisors work their shifts. And we were able to cut $1 million out of our expenses. And for that, beginning at that point. And because see, what happens a lot of times is your business grows, your business starts getting a little fatter, right? You start adding this on that. And when you look at the situation like this, you got to say, where do we have the excess fat? Where can we start cutting it down? But at the same time,
irony with it being a health and fitness.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. But then at the same time, my younger brother, who was a painter, I said, paint the entire health club. So my brother, for like almost a year, was on scaffolding and everything, painting the whole club. Because I didn't want anybody to think we were like going to cut back on anything. I wanted them to see we were still progressing. But there's other things that occur too, like 2012, the recession was still going on, right? And I put together a massive plan to add 12,000 square feet to the front of the building, to build over a retention pond and start building that thing. Everybody who I knew in the industry goes, Joe, now is not the time. You know, there's still a recession going on. I said, no, now's the exact perfect time. I said, because one of the things that I've learned is people are attracted to successful businesses, not the businesses that are failing. And I said, we'll show the people in Gainesville. We're going to just move on forward, and they'll see that we can be successful even during the times when everybody else was crying about the recession. And when I say the smart thing about that was we were able to get steel at lower prices, all the things at lower price because nobody was working. And the construction business was like,
people were
just not moving forward. So we got all that stuff going, and then what happens? The recession ends, and we were able to be way ahead of everybody to start a massive remodeling project of the entire center. And then over time, what do you think happens? Like, Butler Plaza's being built, Celebration's being built. Now it's like, okay, we got to get our pool area done. Where are the guys where are the masons? We need to get masons. And now everybody's digging to try and get everybody, but we only had to deal with that toward the end.
Yeah.
Because from that beginning of the front of the building, the project of remodeling the club went on for 6 solid years. We just finished this past summer.
Yeah.
So anyway,
it's beautiful. I mean, it sounds like, well, when I'm looking at your model, again, outside a lot of this is outside perspective. I'm just fascinated by continuing to scale and grow the fitness centers that are here. Like, was there ever the time where like, oh, maybe Ocala, maybe Tampa, maybe Jacksonville, like maybe across the country? I mean, what is it that's like very focused on Gainesville?
My goal was to become the absolute best we could become in Gainesville. I never had a desire to start going around and building and building and building. I've been, over the years, there were other companies that wanted to buy me, other fitness companies. And I can remember the first one, they were a big company back then. And so I said, well, what's your plan? And so they tell me, well, we plan on putting a box here and a box here and a box here and I'm sitting there as they're saying this. I said, I don't build boxes. I look at my place as a facility with human beings inside of it, where they were just looking at it as a bunch of boxes. And I said, that's not who I am. And so I backed off from that, completely. Now, there's one change. We're now starting to develop boutique centers, and I built one 3 years ago in Palm Harbor, Florida, and I'm just getting the equipment in for the one I built in Tampa on Sunday or Monday. And it's just something that I looked at, something that well, once again, you get those moments in time. In 2011, I picked up a book called The New Rules of Retail, and it talked about all the challenges department stores we're starting to have, with all the boutiques being built and their customers being pulled away. And I'm reading the book and I'm thinking, boy, this is the same problem health clubs are going to have. So I have a great architect up in New York who's built health clubs all over the world, and his name is Rudy Fabiano, but he has no ego. I mean, he's the best in our industry, but so I called him. I said, hey, Rudy, I got to tell you about this book I'm reading. And I started talking about the ideas I got from the book. I said, Rudy, I said, we're going to start a massive remodeling project. I said, I think if you get this concept right, it'll change the way you design health clubs all over the world. And he goes, I'm really intrigued. So he went out and got the book. And I said, do me a favor. Go into the new Bloomingdale's in New York City. But when you walk around it, don't look at it like it's a department store. Look at it like it's a health club. And tell me what you see with all the different spaces. And he called me back. He goes, it was very interesting. He started telling me the things he saw. So we started discussing it. But once again, when you start focusing in on something, right around that time, I was asked to speak in London. And I was there for almost a week. And one day when I wasn't speaking, I was walking down the street and I see this department store. It's called Selfridges. And I thought, let me go take a look at it. I was in that store for 6 hours. I'm lucky I didn't get arrested. I was taking pictures of it.
Thank you, case in the joint.
Yeah. But it was all these stores were inside the store, like Gucci and Prada and Chanel. They were built right inside of the store. And I'm looking at it thinking, you could pick up one of those businesses, one of those boutiques inside, put it out on the street corner, it'd be a complete business. And so I'm looking at all this stuff, and I called Rudy. I said, Rudy, I think the guy that wrote that book must have been sitting inside of this store. And so I took all the pictures and I sent it to him. But once again, when you start focusing in on something, everything kind of starts getting out there in front of you. So I come home from England, and I turn on the TV. What's it say? PBS, doing a show, such and such time, The Secret of Selfridges. The entire history and development of that store, which was built in 1909. You would never know nothing 1909 about it. But so I watch it, and then I ordered the DVD, and I sent it to Rudy. I said, Rudy, watch this, and you'll understand exactly, what I saw. And that became the beginning of this massive remodeling project that we did over 6 years. But here's the irony of it. I ordered a couple DVDs, and Deborah Butler, who's developing Butler Plaza, I said, Deborah, I got something. I want you to watch this. And she comes to request our rehab center. And she goes, okay. So about 2 weeks later, I said, Deborah, did you watch that video? And she goes, watch it. She goes, I have my entire team watch it. She goes, we will be building stores that are like Selfridges. So it's like one thing leads into another. But if I didn't pick up that book, it would have never, I guarantee you, if I was walking down the street and I saw a department store, I would have never even walked into the department store. But when I was just telling you earlier about the boutiques, that I built in Palm Harbor and now in Tampa, we have a program inside the health club called X-Force Body, and it's a phenomenal, phenomenal program. And one day I was looking at it and I go, I wonder if I can do what I thought about when I was in Selfridges. If I could just take this model, put it somewhere else, and it could work, see if it could work all by itself. So I opened the place in Palm Harbor simply to learn. And so I did it for 3 years and been building a place in Tampa and got it all built. Now we'll be opening up in the next couple of weeks to take what I learned from Palm Harbor now and apply in Tampa, and it's in South Tampa, so it's a much more dense population than what we have in Palm Harbor. But I'll keep learning and see how that leads to the next one. And I know what I would do there. I have those in the Tampa, Clearwater, St. Petersburg area, but I'm still learning. So it's not like I have to go real fast to do it. I just got to keep learning. So, like I said, one thing leads to another.
How much time are you spending on like seeking out or figuring out the right locations, the right places? Like why Tampa? Why Palm Harbor? Like why?
Well, it just it just so ended up that there was a girl that I knew down in Clearwater who worked for a personal training center, who was phenomenal. I always knew she was phenomenal at what she did, but the person who owned it, I think, didn't appreciate how great she was. Maybe could even be a little jealous when you have an employee who's more popular than you are.
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
One day she called me up and she told me I just got fired. I said, really? I said, why'd you get fired? And she went through and she said why she was told she was fired. I said, that's not the reason you were fired. I said, I'll tell you why you were fired. And she had a little boy, and I said, did you get any severance pay or anything? She goes, 5 days. And she'd worked for this company for 4 years, never took a vacation, never got a sick day, never took a day off. And so she went through everything. I said, man, that's great news. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, you're going to work for me now. I said, we're going to build a place right by you. And so I found a location, which was by her. I wanted to get some, because I knew she had a little boy and everything, and I wanted to have it close to where she lived.
That's so crazy.
So I found this location, and it was a nice looking shopping center, strip mall, but it was very nice looking. And just negotiated and built it. When I started looking around Tampa, I had a friend of mine who was a broker taking me all around Tampa. And I'm looking at all the strip centers, because that's where you want to put this particular thing. And I'm looking at them going, I would never put a facility in any of these strip centers. I said I'd have to remodel the whole strip center to make it look like I'd want it to look, to put in my own boutique. And so about a year ago, she said, hey, they're really developing a new one. They're just building it, and it's really nice. So I went over there and I saw it, and I go, this is the kind of center I'd want to be in. And it's in South Tampa, which is a great area. And so I started negotiating on the lease. Well, I had a lawyer out of Chicago who's great negotiating the lease. So anyway, we signed the lease, a while ago, and started building it. I guess probably last September, and it's all finished now. Like I said, so we're just waiting for the equipment to come in, and we're putting all the open houses and all the PR and everything together, because I was thinking about it. Just like you have to think about marketing and all. I said, where's one of the best ways to get good PR down there? And I said, the Tampa Bay Bucks are a pretty popular team. So what I'm doing is through one of the cheerleaders, who was a cheerleader like 25 years ago, she's sending a message out to all the cheerleaders who are at least 45 years old now. And we're going to run a trial program with about 10 of them to show what we could do to them, because I know they're all so well known in that area. And we have some media people coming in who are going to go through the program, and we know what we can do to them, and it's dramatic what we can do to them. And so we're getting all that stuff going, right now.
Dude, that's so interesting. I mean, just I just think as an entrepreneur, sometimes you can be very impatient, right? And that just sounds like a very patient process. I mean, you've had the centers here in Gainesville for a long time now these boutiques, because you recognize this opportunity. I don't know, I'm just fascinated by so how long will you just spend time focusing on the Tampa store, and then the Tampa studio, and then being like, all right, now the next, now the next, or are you already looking?
No, not yet.
Not
I
yet.
want to get this one
You're just
going.
waiting for the opportunities.
And learn what it is, because the opportunities will be there. But the super thing is, this particular girl is she's Bulgarian. She just became an American citizen about 3 years ago. Hard worker, just a great personality, connects to people really well. And I can really develop the business through her, which is what I want to do. And I go down there, I meet with the different people, but
How often do you see yourself having to go down there?
maybe once every 2 weeks, So, but it's in real good hands, and we have really good people working for us down there already, because she really develops a great family culture, with the employees, and they'll do anything for her, and she'll do anything for them. So no, we'll see. I said I'm learning. I accept the fact that I'm learning, that I don't know it all, and we'll keep figuring it out as we move forward. But as you know too, growing a business is a matter of being able to delegate responsibilities to the right people, and then holding the people accountable and following up with the people and not disconnecting yourself from them. So we'll just kind of keep it all together and keep moving forward together.
I feel like accountability is the hard part. That's the part that I'm not the best at.
Yeah.
It's because I don't know, maybe it's just because you don't, I think you just want to be like, hey, I just want you to show up and do your job and do a good job.
You want to be accountable.
Yeah, like it's like
come from within. But.
Yeah, like just do what I ask and do what you're supposed to do, and I don't have to like stress over anything.
Well, yeah, I know, but you don't want to not stress over things because you don't know. So the thing is, once we set up the plans, then it's a matter of everybody following the plan. And just like in the health clubs, I mean, we put together all our objectives. We put our objectives together in 2017 for 2 years. And every month we all get together and go through all the objectives to make sure everybody is doing all the things that they said they're going to be doing. But when you really develop a team of people, if you are all part of my team and and Colin, you were having a problem getting one thing done, the goal of the team is that we can all pitch in and help you, get it done. But I have to know whether or not you're getting it done.
Right.
And so we do hold people accountable. And we do expect them to do their job, and it doesn't matter how long you've been working for, with me. I mean, I have some employees been with me. I got one employee with me for 42 years. I got others who've been with me 30 to 40 years, a whole bunch of them. And but we still have the things that we have to accomplish, and we have to hold each other accountable. Just like I can be held accountable. I have to be held accountable for the things I have to do too.
And how do they hold you accountable?
Well, they can ask me what's going on in any particular area, where we are in any particular area. But the thing that I always do is I always make them aware of where I am on a different projects, different things that we're working on. Because I meet with my leadership team every single Monday morning for 2 to 3 hours. Every single Monday morning. People say, well, what do you cover?
Yeah.
Every Monday morning, I said, we always have enough stuff to cover to make sure we're getting things done that we need to get done, and then if there's questions or issues. And a lot of times it can be learning about different things, and I'm pretty big in that. Even history, making sure that my whole team understands, not our history, like the history of America. And because I want them to understand, where we all came from and where our DNA is from. And then doing fun things with them. For example, when I showed them a lot on the Civil War and on Gettysburg, and my staff really gets into the different series and learning about the different battles. And then when it's all said and done, I brought them all up to Gettysburg for 3 days, and we went through battlefield leadership, where they all had to take the role of the commanding officer for all the different battles that took place, and say, okay, let's talk about it. And so just different things, like that, where you can all learn together, and that's what we do.
That's awesome. Mike.
That's crazy. Yeah. So it seems like you've been on the forefront of a lot of change in the industry, whether it was, what you built here, the boutiques, and there's a great confidence there. And we talked about being an entrepreneur and only having like a plan A. Do you think that confidence comes more from the vision that you've come up with, or is it more like the skills that you've developed and the team you've surrounded yourself with, and just knowing that it's going to work out?
Well, I think it's gaining more knowledge all the time. I am a continual learner. I never look at it like I know enough. I never look at it like I'm good enough, that I have to become better. And fortunately, my whole team, they all look at it that way. We all have to find ways to become better. So I look for all the different resources, for all of us. I'll give you an example. There's a person who's in charge of what's called enculturation inside of our company. When I began, I had 3 employees, and today I have 500 employees. But you always want to make sure that everybody is sticking to what the culture of the company is, and we had to first define all that, which we did. But her role is making sure the culture of the company stays consistent through all departments. So, for example, one of the things that she would do is she has like 3 meetings with 12 different individuals who they talk about all the different issues in their particular area. And then they make sure once you understand all that, now you get it out to all the people so they understand it. But I just couldn't say, okay, Allison, you're in charge of enculturation. I hired somebody who was an expert in it for a year to work with her, to help her understand the whole process, that you go through to be able to become a good leader in that area. So you have the vision for the company, and now you got to implement, what are the things to accomplish the mission? How do we make sure we live the core values of the company? How do we make sure that people inside the company fit the culture of the company, which then says, how do we become better at hiring people so we'll know whether or not they fit the culture of the company, if they have the core values that we have? Because I've just learned over the years, you can't teach somebody your core values. I can't teach you to have integrity. You either got it or you don't. We just have to find out if you have it. And so there's different things that we can do to find out. And that all becomes part of the hiring process.
Have you ever had a time over the years where you're just, 500 team members is a lot at a point where it was growing quickly, you notice things were, I don't want to say falling apart, but like from a cultural standpoint, like unhealthy?
No, every once in a while they may have made a mistake in hiring somebody, but that's so rare. It hasn't happened, and probably the last time I saw that happen was 10 years ago. But to give you a simple thing that we do is I have about 5 people on that hiring team, and when they're going through each individual and deciding who they're going to bring on, if one person says, I just didn't feel right about it, we don't hire that person. Now, years and years ago, somebody was brought onto the team, and one person said, I don't really feel good about him. And she was overridden, which she never should have been overridden, but she was overridden by the person who was the leader. And that person turned out to be a bad person for us to hire. But we quickly ended that. And then we made sure you all understand, unless everybody agrees. Because sometimes, I really trust gut feelings. A lot of people say, oh, you got to use your brain and all that. But I can tell you, I think you know who Deepak Chopra is, right? I once heard him say it perfectly. He says, we have the same neurotransmitters in our gut that we have in our brain. The only difference between the two is the ones in our gut haven't elevated to the same level of self-doubt that the ones in our brain have. So you go with your gut, it's just something doesn't feel right. And you learn.
I'm that guy.
Yeah.
You have been, and you've been in similar situations, and we don't have to discuss that, but like where that gut feeling,
it's just
you didn't make it, and it hurt.
Yeah, no, I know. You just feel it, and after a while, you say, God, why didn't I just trust my gut?
Yep.
So
I've had big mistakes. I think I've even talked about some of them on the podcast where I didn't go with my gut, and I'm like, and it's usually because of outsiders. It's like my gut's telling me one thing, but everybody kind of like what you're saying. Where people are advising you, Joe, don't do that right now. Like, the economy's gonna crash. Like, you'd be stupid to do that right now. Like, no. Like, my gut's telling me do it. And I had all these outside voices saying, no, don't do it, don't like. And then I listened to them, and sure enough, failure.
Yeah. And I'm a pilot, so I fly all the time. And you use your brains, you look through and you think, but then your gut may say, everything seems to be okay, but there's something just right. I can remember one time I had some people in my airplane. We were flying back from North Carolina, and it was night. And I turned my engine on, and I'm sitting there, and every report of the airport was it was fine. I just said to the people, something just doesn't seem right. And I'm sitting in my airplane with the propeller going, not taxiing yet. All of a sudden, this massive wind comes through, and my airplane was stable, but it went right past me, ripped a tree right out of the ground. I turned off the engine. I said, we're not leaving tonight. But I don't even know why. It was pitch black out. Couldn't see anything. And the report was fine. But there was something they didn't see. So that's where your gut can tell you, okay, maybe something ain't right.
Where did the passion for flying come from? Is that something you always had?
Well, it was funny. When I was 21, I read a book called Think and Grow Rich. And I was so inspired at the end, I wrote a list of 10 things that I wanted to do. And it was funny because it was right after I got down to my last 12 cents. But I got the book, and I wrote my list out. And I think it was number 5 on my list was I'll become a pilot and own my own airplane. And I read that list every night, every morning for years and years and years. And by the time I was 24 and a half and I started building the club, I didn't have time to read it anymore because I was working 18 hours a day to build the club. There was no difference between going to bed and not getting up in the morning anymore. And but it was funny because when I was 28 years old, I was sitting in my office in my first health club, and a friend of mine who was a lawyer who was also a pilot, and I'd flown with him, he comes inside my office. He goes, "So, you ever going to learn how to fly a plane?" I go, "Darn, that's on my list." And I said, "Where do you learn?" And so he told me, well, they do it over, and told me the name of the place at the airport, which is called Gulf Atlantic back then. So I called him up. I said, it was 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. I said, what do I need to do to become a pilot? They go, you should have to meet with a flight instructor, and he'd go over everything with you. I said, well, when do you have an opening? He goes, we have one at 2:30. I said, okay, I'll be right over. I said, I'll see you later, Bill. I left, and I went over, and I sat down with the flight instructor, and he explained to me all the things I had to do to become a pilot. And then I said to him, well, when can I start? He goes, right now. So I went outside. He showed me how to pre-flight an airplane, got in the pilot seat, showed me how to use the radio, and we got to the end. He goes, now go over here and give it full power, and when it gets to 60, pull it back. And I did, and started flying, and he's telling me, okay, now do this, do this, do this. And we flew for a while, and he goes, okay, we'll go back and land. I said, you actually want me to land this thing too? He goes, no, I'll take care of that part. But from that day, I never stopped flying. If I didn't have on the list, I would have probably said, someday I'll do it.
Yeah.
And if he didn't question me, maybe I wouldn't have done it that moment, but I would have done it because I did everything I had on my list.
Do you think it's, when you're going to these other locations, are you going to be flying there, or you drive? Yeah.
I fly all the time.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to jump in my plane and
Hop over.
Yeah, I fly.
go to Palm Harbor, Tampa.
Yep.
That's cool. Tell me a little bit about the list, because I know that that's part of your story, and a big part, right? Like when you read that book and you wrote those, it was 10 things.
Yeah. The first thing on the list was I'll own my health club in Gainesville, Florida. I will own my own health club in Gainesville, Florida, so no one's ever going to tell me where I'm going to live, because I had to live in Merritt Island. I had to live in St. Petersburg, during those periods of time. And but back then, I remember I told you all the clubs I worked for that went bankrupt. Well, there were more than just the ones I worked for. And so the second thing on the list was I'll make the health club respected in the Gainesville community, because I said they had a horrible reputation. But I just started putting some fun things down, like, okay, I'll have a home in the mountains, a home on the ocean, I'll build my parents a home. Put down that I'll own a little Mercedes, like the kind the $6 million man used to drive, which was a TV show when I was a kid. And then I put down that by the time I'm 25 years old, I will make $100,000. I mean, I wasn't making no money at all. And then I put down that, I'll become a pilot and own my own airplane. I put down that I'll become a black belt. I put down I'll travel all over the world. I travel all over America. I said I'll travel all over the world. And I remember the last thing I wrote down was I'll save $1 million. Only because when I grew up, I heard everybody say, I wish I had $1 million. So I said, just put it on the list. And so I did. And but every night I read it. And every morning I read it, because I heard a psychologist, a guy by the name of Dennis Whaley. I used to listen to his tapes all the time. And he just made the comment. He goes, you can't move away from what you're thinking. He goes, you're always moving in the direction of your dominant thoughts. And I said, well, let me put my thoughts into my head so much that I'll keep doing the kind of things I need to do to get there. Probably the biggest eye-opener on that list was, I started the health club when I was 24 and a half. If you took, when I was 21, 22, 23, I never made over $11,000 in a year. And when I was 23, I actually put a line through 100,000, and I put 60,000. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to do that either. But I was always reading books on how to think. And when I was 24, I was still reading my list. And I thought, man, I just copped out. I've just finished reading the book, The Laws of Success. And I said, man, I copped out. It just says you're supposed to believe it. So I put a line back through 60,000. I put 100,000 back on that list. So in 24 and a half, I started the health club with the $1,700. But the day that I turned 26, I had exactly $100,000 in my savings account.
Wow.
And I remember when I saw that number, I said, it's not 99, it's not 101. It was the exact number I wrote down. I said, I can do anything.
Don't you wish you would have written down like $100 million?
No. I didn't need $100 million. I only put 100,000 because that sounded good at that point, and I put $1 million because I always heard that number. I mean, look, I came from a very middle class family in upstate New York. I mean, I have 7 brothers and sisters, and my mother was a nurse, my father was military. You didn't think that big, right? But $1 million was big. And but by the time I was 32, I did every single thing on that list. And I just realized you just have to know what it is you want to do. And it's not like I kept thinking, well, I want $1 million. I didn't. I just went to work, and I just worked hard all the time. And I used to watch some people that they didn't work that hard, and they say, why do people waste so much time? I just didn't understand it. Like, why are they just BSing instead of doing their work? And then I realized they didn't have a list. So they were just doing it to make it to 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
To go home. And I wasn't doing that.
Yeah, me neither.
So, I know.
Do you have another list?
I didn't need to put together another list because I knew I think the list became projects. Okay, the next project, because it's not like I want all these things. I don't. You
don't need all these possessions.
I don't
care about them.
I never thought about those.
Yeah.
I figured if all the other things go right, if I want something, I can buy it. But the focus was never on that. The focus was always on how do we make the business better? How do we make the staff better? How do I help the staff become better? And those were the things that always drove me. And once again, when I was 21, it seems like I read a lot of great books, but when I was 21, some of the things hit me, and I was reading a book, and I came across a quote, and it said, "If you help enough people get what they want out of life, you'll get everything you want out of life." And I read that, and I go, that's what business is all about. It's not about you; it's about how do you help other people. And that was a humongous driving force for the business, for my whole business. And everybody in my business understands. Not about you, it's about how do you help them. And I would tell them, somehow the way the universe works, it'll come back to you without you ever worrying about it coming back to you. If you worry about it coming back to you, it ain't going to come back to you. So that's been a driving force for the whole company and for everything that I do.
How much do you read now?
Oh, I still read all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, back then, but they're different things that I read. I read a lot about strategy. I mean, I read a lot about the military. Back then, all the books that I read were how to keep my mind focused on keeping me going, right? Because everybody would tell me, just get out of that business, man. It's terrible. I had one bank president tell me he felt sorry for me when I was trying to get money to start my own club.
Oh, man.
And but it was like I had to read books on how to keep thinking but once again, a lot of these things are just a matter of luck. But that's when preparation meets opportunity, right? And when I was 20 years old, I was sitting in an office. I opened up a drawer, and there was a book in there, Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. I go, heard about these positive thinking books. I never read one, but I heard about them. And I started reading it. And I'm reading about these people who accomplished these phenomenal things by the way that they thought. I remember I'm reading this book, and I'm going, I got a mind just like these people have. Why can't I accomplish something? So I remember, I said, brand new in the business, brand new salesperson. So I set a goal. I said, I'm going to become the top salesperson in this entire company. And they had clubs out through Salt Lake City and everywhere. And 3 months later, I was the top salesperson in the entire company. And I remember saying, how did that happen? And then I realized it. When I put this thing into my head, then I started doing all the things it took to become better at what I was doing. Even there was a guy who ran a health club down in Ocala who lived in Gainesville. He didn't have a car. but I knew he was really good in sales. And I said, how about if I drive you to work every morning, early in the morning, but I'm going to talk to you the whole time about sales? And that's what I did. And I learned a lot, from him.
That's incredible.
But that's awesome. But you just, when you have those things, all of a sudden they just become huge opportunities for you, because that book just kind of got my brain thinking. But then I got transferred, to Merritt Island, and I had to live in Cocoa Beach. I had to live in a Holiday Inn, and I would go to work all day. I'd go back at night to the Holiday Inn, come back the next day, go back to the Holiday Inn. I hated it. I knew Merritt Island wasn't where I wanted to live.
I'm from Merritt Island, by the way.
But I visit.
Merritt Island sucks, Mike.
I just had to mention it at that point.
I have great friends from down there, but I knew it's not where I wanted to live. And I can remember one day I was driving to work, literally. Now understand, I'm 20 years old. I got tears coming out of my eyes. I'm thinking, I hate it here. I don't want to be here. And I decided I was going to quit. And then I thought, well, what am I going to do when I quit? Like, go home? I have great parents, but I wasn't ready to go home and live with them again. So I thought, well, maybe I can find another book. And so I went to the bookstore, and inside the Merritt Square Mall, and I say this book, The Amazing Results of Positive Thinking. I thought, it must be people who read that book like I did. And it wasn't, but I'm reading the book about these people who went through the most miserable times and how they worked their way through it. And I'm reading the book thinking, man, I don't have a problem. That guy, he has a problem. I just had an attitude problem, and I changed my attitude. And I changed. I like it here. And everything about it changed. And that was the beginning of that. And then eventually, when I was asked to come back to Gainesville, and that was another long story. I won't go through the whole thing with it. But when I was asked to come back to Gainesville, when I was 21, and this guy from Louisiana asked me if I wanted to manage the club in Gainesville. Of course, I said yes. I wanted to be back. I thought maybe I better go get another book. So I went to the bookstore, and I see this book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I thought, well, that's a cool title for a book. And I took it off the shelf, and right on the back said, this book is responsible for more people becoming millionaires than any book ever written. And I thought, not that I ever thought about becoming a millionaire. I thought, but that's a pretty cool thing to be able to say. And I read the book, and I put together the list. But then there was book after book after book. But then one day I was in a car with this guy who was coming down to run a health club, and he came also from Utah. And I'm in the car with him, and I see this book. I said, it was called Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill. I said, I didn't know Napoleon Hill had written another book. He goes, yeah. He goes, this is like my Bible. And I got that book. Man, I could not stop reading that book.
Oh, what was that one called?
Laws of Success. The 16 Laws of Success.
I've read Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah, this is about this thick. It's a big book, but it's a great book. But let me just tell you like how things go. I put together my personal list, but when I started, back in 96, 97, right around there, I had a meeting with my key people that I thought was going to last 8 hours. It lasted 6 months. We kept working on it. But I said to him at one of the points, I said, okay, this is our next project. Imagine it's 10 years from now. This was 98. I said, imagine it's 10 years from now, and a national business magazine is coming to write a story about us. And I want you to go somewhere in this house. You got an hour. Write the story they're going to be writing about us, but it's 10 years from now. So they all came back with their stories. Then they read their stories. And we're starting to write all these things on a board. That's cool as heck. And we started writing all these things down that they would be writing about us. And I won't go through all of them with you, but the very last thing is we'll be on the cover of a national business magazine, right? And in 2008, we were on the cover of Inc. magazine.
Yeah.
And so, it was the thing that was on the list. We all supposed to be on the national news for something good, and we were. And so the irony to that is when the author, who's a great guy I become super friends with, wrote the entire article for the magazine, one day I get this package in the mail, and I look at it, and I open it up, and there's 2 books in there. And one is collector's edition of Think and Grow Rich, and the other one is all the articles that Napoleon Hill had written 21 years before he ever wrote Think and Grow Rich. And there's a letter from the executive director of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. He said, I read your article and all your references to Think and Grow Rich, and he said, I just wanted to send this to you. And so I had the book, so I called him up and I said, hey, it's Joe Cirulli. I said, I got your books. And I said, I just want to say thank you very much, for doing that. It means a lot. And he goes, I've been meaning to do it. He goes, but I was at home, and he goes, I got on my treadmill and I turned on the news, and you were on the news. I was on Fox News. And he said, so I got off the treadmill and I went, I put it together and sent the books. So it's just funny how things, how things all tie in together.
I mean, it's crazy just hearing, last week we had John Spence on, and just hearing a lot of the similarities. I mean, from these little turning points, these little light bulbs, these little, investing into yourself, the reading. Because I mean, that was one of the big things he said too. Was like he had reached that moment, and he was just like,
I think he's read more books than he had in the library.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, and I'm trying to figure out my way of consuming that kind of I'm doing a lot of Audible and stuff right now.
Too.
Okay,
yeah, because you can read a book and listen to a book.
Yeah,
at the same time.
Really terrible at reading books.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I just have multiple problems with my brain, and I think it's not a problem at all. I think it's like my brain starts firing because I start getting ideas, and I have to stop reading
Write it down.
and write down ideas.
Which is fine. That's
right?
why I said you got all the time.
But
in
I
the
just
world to
never
read a book.
finish a book.
Yeah. Well, as long as you get some great ideas, you're okay.
Yeah. And that's something that other people have encouraged me on. They said, look, like if you read a book and you can take one thing away from it, then it was a success.
Sure.
So it's just really, really interesting. I did have something else but I forgot where I was going with that. Anyway, what you got?
I kind of wanted to circle back to some of the things in your business. I know that we talked about hiring a little bit and getting the right people in there, and I've lived here in Gainesville now for 15 years, so I've had several friends that have gone through the interviewing process at Gainesville Health and Fitness, and some that made it, some that didn't. But I know one of the things that I feel like you used to do, maybe still do, were like group interviews and stuff like that. And there's unique things that I've heard. Some of them I just remember that they were unique. I don't exactly remember what they were. But can you talk just a little bit about that and isolating the right people? Does that ever even change as we go from Gen X to millennials to now Gen Z? How do you isolate those people, and what are those interviews like?
Well, what doesn't change are the core values of the company, right? What doesn't change is the culture, of the company. So it doesn't matter which generation you're, but you have to fit into that culture, and you have to have those core values. So if we have a thing in our culture that's built around the fact that when people talk to you, you listen to them. And you could do a simple thing like just ask 8 people to write about themselves for 5 minutes and then stand up and read their stories. And then you can just look at everybody and see, are they listening to him? Are they listening to you? Are they listening to you? Or do they all of a sudden start writing more things about themselves that they just thought about? If they do that, they'll never make it, to the next interview. But if now different people, you go through the things, now we want to know, do you actually listen to them? So it could be, Mary, could you tell us a little bit about Colin, where he's from, and what are some of the books he talked about reading? And you're going to know whether or not somebody actually listened, to you. But there's even simple things, like I remember in the Inc. magazine, they wrote about one where, you go into a room and there'd be 8 chairs in the room, and we'd be interviewing you. And we say, well, excuse me, before we start, they need some chairs next door, and I'm just going to grab some of these chairs. You start grabbing the chairs and walking out the door with them. After the second chair, if you don't stand up and grab a chair and walk out with me, you'll never make it through the interview. Mm-hmm. Or they put some garbage. Awesome. They put some garbage on the ground, and 8 people walk right past it. Mm-hmm. I had a supervisor go and say, I just want to thank you all for being here. The interview's over. I mean, nobody even stopped to pick it off the ground. Because you need people who naturally do those kind of things.
Right.
But you as a leader have to always do all those kind of things. I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, one of the big things I'm big on is when a person comes to your business, or comes to our business, the moment the beginning of the visit to the business begins is when they get out of their car. That means if we have garbage and stuff in the parking lot, that's the first thing that they see. So we're all responsible for picking up garbage when you're walking from your car, to the front door. And a couple of weeks ago, I was walking through the parking lot, and there was something that was on the ground, and it was like broken up. And one of my trainers comes there, and he sees me, and he's picking it all up, and he goes, "I'm only getting it before you do." So you just have to make sure that you do those same things. But there's other things too. Like a long time ago, I learned that you could be my friend until things get real tough, and then all of a sudden you're just not the same person anymore. I learned that a long time ago, that people under pressure are not the same people they are when there's no pressure. And so there was just an example of it back in the early '80s, and I saw this and I go, wow, what a change in that person. And so I said, I got to find out what you're made out of. The question is, how do I put you under an intense situation that I'm going to learn what you're like under an intense situation? So, knowing what I know, I said, we're going to take every person through a high intensity workout. It's going to be miserable. I don't even care if you can't make it through, because most people won't be able to make it through. What I do care is that you give it everything you got until you can't go. And you don't complain or whatever else that you could do, that you listen to directions and you give it everything you got. And so, when I talk to all the employees, I ask them, well, how was the interview workout? And I go, whoa. I go, but the thing is, the reason you're here is because you all gave it everything you had. But you can learn a lot. I'll give you another example. My manager, there was this one guy that everybody was high and, he'd be really, really good. He goes, let me take him through the workout. He took him through the workout, and the kid, muscular kid and all, he was doing the leg extension, and he just stopped. And the manager says, I think you can get a couple more. So he does a couple more, and he stops. He goes, I think you can still get another one. And the kid made a few disparaging comments to the manager and got up and walked out the door, which was great, right? Because he just didn't like that someone was asking him to say you could do more. And so I want people to just do it. And it's not like we're going to be, dictators when they're there, but I just want to find out that you'll give it everything you got, no matter what, because that's what you show in your work too. So everybody does it. Even if you're going to work in the kids club, you're going to do it.
We're going to start sending new scooters for less team members through.
I've been hoping
through
that for a long time.
So send them over there, let them go through that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's time for the second part of your interview. You're going to Gainesville Health and Fitness, and this is what you have to do. Have you had other businesses request that?
No. But
it sounds awesome.
Yeah. But anyway, it's just a way I can make it miserable on you and see how you are when things are not so great. And so I've just learned different things over the years.
I just think it's fascinating because I feel like sometimes I come up just short of maybe having this like savior complex where it's like I feel like as a leader, it's like maybe through my influence, I can create change. Like I want to believe in the good of people, and I also think it's interesting that you work in this business, or you've built this business where reformation is a huge part of what you do, and a lot of that's physical, but a lot of that's mental too. But that it's so when it comes down to hiring people, it's about just you either got it or you don't.
Well, I can give you a perfect example back a long time ago when I was reading all these books, right? How to think. I actually got to the point I said, I think I can help people think like this. But as I told other people, by the time I went through about 100 employees and maybe one of them changed, I thought, maybe better if I just hired people like this. And that's how it was. Yeah. Some things you can't instill in a person. You can see raw talent in people. I'm not saying you can't. I remember I met through friends of mine in Cocoa Beach, this guy who was a friend of theirs, and real nice kid, real country. He couldn't complete one sentence where I think he got the grammar right. But I could tell he was a good person. Next thing I know, he's moving to Gainesville and he's applying for a job. And he went through a workout. He gave it so much he couldn't leave the club for 4 hours after the workout. He was in the lobby. He couldn't get out of the chair. And anyway, and we hired him because of those qualities. And he came to me and he said, Joe, he goes, what can I do to become better? I said, you need to start reading. You need to start reading more because you need to improve your grammar. You want to know something? Not only did he improve his grammar, he became a salesman, became one of the best salespeople I've ever had. Then he was offered a job in in Atlanta. And you know what he does today? He goes to all the major banks in the world selling them high technology.
Dang.
And he's very, very successful. And he's still a great friend of mine. And we train together. And so there's just different, you first have to go with the character of the person. Because you can teach them skills, but I can't teach you your character. It's something you got.
Yeah.
And it may work in another company, it just wouldn't work in our company if they didn't have that right character.
That's awesome. We got to wrap up in a minute, but I have a couple more questions.
Sure.
And so I said we had John Spence on the show last week, and I said, John, I was like, we have Joe coming up on the show. And I was like, what questions? I'm trying to really, everybody's got to know, like, I want this podcast to be different than other podcasts. I really want to, I wanted to have that thing, that's just different and special and unique. And so I was like, there ain't no better person to ask than John, right? And we asked him this question. He's like, you need to ask Joe the same question. And one of them was like, what do you think Gainesville needs to meet its potential?
Oh, I think Gainesville is moving towards its potential right now. I mean, obviously, we've got a highly educated group of people who live in Gainesville. And so with all the technology and everything coming, it's kind of a perfect model. I mean, the things that we needed to make Gainesville a more upscale city are the things that are occurring right now at Butler Plaza and at Celebrations and all the other construction that's going around the city. So I think we have all the right ingredients right now. I don't think I'm going to say, well, we need this or we need that. I think we're developing those things. And as you're learning yourself through all the different podcasts you're doing, how many great organizations are out there doing their thing you just never heard about them. And like even with Mitch Glazer and Rich Glazer, the things that they're doing, out in Alachua and the developments and the vision that they have there, because I mean that's what develops a city, right? Is a lot of people with vision, and I think we have those.
Yeah, I have a vlog of that coming out soon. So if you want to check, like Mitch took me out there, we had a little private tour going through that, and it was cool, man. It's neat. Like I know we talked a little bit about the boutique stuff, but like where do you see the health and fitness industry in a decade?
I don't know if I'm good enough to go out for a decade. I can remember one day I was listening to one of my employees interviewing a girl that wanted to work in the kids club, and they said, "What is your 5-year plan?" And I'm thinking, damn, I don't know if I have a 5-year plan.
It's really hard these days, right?
I know, because it just evolves.
Changes so fast.
It evolves all the time. The one thing that I do know is that the human body still needs exercise. And it's just a matter of finding out the kind of things that you have to change and adapt and adjust. I mean, heck, my first health club was 1,500 square feet. My current one, big one's 80,000 square feet. So there's a lot of things that change. And the one thing in the industry is that's growing up throughout the whole world is virtual reality. So the thing is, how does virtual reality tie into what we do inside the clubs? Like at our women's club, we've just instituted a lot of virtual classes. So we have all the regular schedule of classes, but there's times when we don't have classes. So we have a whole schedule of virtual classes. So you could go into the Group X room and do the classes with a screen and a teacher, on the screen. I mean, if you look at like Peloton, I mean, that's one of the things that they're doing. Obviously, that's making them very popular. But it's one of the things that's growing inside of our industry. The other things is the use of technology inside the clubs, which will have its challenges, where when you come into the club, they can track you, everything you do, and kind of get an idea of all the different places you go. Even some of the clubs are sending you an email based upon where they see you, the information based upon where they see you spending most of your time. But there's also going to be all kinds of laws And I don't know how I actually feel about that, of knowing you walk into the club and you know you're being tracked everywhere, but you're being tracked on your phone.
Yeah,
We're all being tracked
Apple
on
right
our
now.
phone.
My iWatch.
Oh yeah, no.
My heartbeat right now.
We buy our own tracking devices.
My beats per minute is.
Yeah. And somebody else may know what your heartbeat per minute are. But that's the thing. Those are the things that are changing, is the use of technology for marketing purposes and the virtual reality. Those are the things that are occurring. But there's also something else that we did too, because I knew this would be coming, and that is really discussing recovery in all of our marketing messaging. So we developed an entire room that's based on recovery. It had the whole pool area completely redone so that it would be more resort-like, to make it really around the concept of now take time to recover. And through the steams, and saunas, and whirlpools, and cold plunges, and stuff like that.
That's super interesting. Do you see, there's, like I feel, and it's come up on the podcast a couple times, we're definitely in a time where mental health is extremely important. I mean, is that something that you guys see incorporating into what you're doing?
I'll make the story short, but within a 2-year period, I had 4 deaths in my family: my mother, my father, my younger sister's husband, and my older sister's husband. Now, he had cancer. My parents had some other issues that occurred, but my one brother-in-law, I know, he just had so much stress in his life, and he must have had a major stroke at like 59. And then I had a woman who was helping take care of my father because he had had a stroke. And one day I was at the house. She was 52 years old, and once again, to make a long story short, she got a call that her husband had a heart attack, and he was one of the drivers of the big logs, the big trees that are cut down out in the forest for transport to the other places, and he was up in Homerville, Georgia, and he had a heart attack out in the boondocks, and anyway, it was an interesting hour trying to figure out what was going on, until one of the things too, just so you can always know, if you ever call 911, you can ask to talk to someone in another city, in another state. And I said, can you connect me to the 911 in Homerville, Georgia? And they did, and I said, can I talk to the sheriff? And I talked to the sheriff, and boy, he was like an old country boy, Georgia sheriff. And he was in tears. He said, I couldn't help him. He said, I was with him. And then I had to put him on the phone with E, the wife, and she just broke down. And when I drove her back home to Lake City where she lived, and on the way back I was just thinking, how many people die from stress, get sick from stress? And because he was 52 years old, but I knew he was under a lot of stress. And I was driving back, I think I got to build an area that's designed to help people just relax. So took a room that I had kept vacant for a year because I didn't know what to do with it. And then I said, okay, now I know what to do with it. So we built a whole room. It's called Chill. And it's got really, really high-end massage tables in it that you just sit down and put a code into it, and you'll get the best massage. And it's all water that's constantly hitting your body. And so that was the beginning. And then when I talked to the architect about the pool area, I said, I want to continue this. He goes, look, I'll build a pool area that's like a hotel resort. And that's what we did. I know we did, because originally it was supposed to cost $400,000. By the time we got done, it was $1.2 million. So I know we accomplished it.
That's super interesting. What are you reading right now?
Well, actually, right now I'm
on a break.
No. Oh, no. It's actually called Pale Horse.
Pale Horse.
And the only reason is I'm part of a group called Vistage. You may be familiar with them. And they bring in great speakers. And the last speaker was a 30-year veteran in the Army, and he was really involved in strategy and teamwork. And so I listened to his presentation, which was exceptional. And I downloaded his book, so I'm listening to that. I mean, I listened to one right before that, which is a military but not military, and it's called Can't Hurt Me. And I mean, you better be ready for, every other word out of his mouth is but the story he tells is incredible. A guy who was overweight, 297 pounds, talked about the dozen donuts he ate every day and everything else, and came home one day and saw a show on the Navy SEALs. And from that point on, called the Navy. 10 guys wouldn't even talk to him. The 11th guy said, "Come on in." He stepped on the scale. He goes, "You're a big boy." He goes, "Yeah, I know." And he says, "Okay, here's the deal. You want to become a SEAL? You have to lose 106 pounds in 3 months." And he did.
Dang.
And then you listen to the story of him becoming a SEAL, him becoming an Army Ranger, him running 100-mile races. Him eventually said, "I'm going to set the world record in chin-ups," and doing 4,134 chin-ups in 24 hours. I mean, it's like you're going, holy cow! But everything it's in your mind. It's in your mind. You can either quit or you keep going. And so those now that they're a little bit more military, they're still very inspiring to me. And so that's what I've been going through. But I mean, I go through other books.
And that kind of leads me to my next question. I mean, you get to that point where you gotta keep going, don't quit. So what, over all of these years, what's been your biggest failure?
Biggest, I don't mean to sound egotistical. I can't think of my biggest failure because there's nothing that I did, something that happened that helped me go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Could I look at all the health clubs I worked for that went bankrupt as my failure? They weren't really my failures, but I remember reading a quote once. It says, if you look back over your life and you look at all the things that seem to be so wrong, so terrible, it spurred you on to the next thing, and if those things never happened, you would have never been spurred on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at it. There's nothing that I look at and said, wow, that was a catastrophe. If I make a mistake with something, I can quickly correct the mistake. Times when I was learning to become a pilot and I almost got killed, I thought maybe, okay, that could have been a catastrophe, because there were times. And then I just like, the only time I'm going to learn how to become a good pilot is if I get into horrible situations that I got to work my way through. But I remember one time I almost got killed, and I just I had flown my mother up to Jacksonville, and I was coming back, and it occurred. I was a new pilot in a really fast airplane, and I made a mistake with something that I did, and I was going right into the ground, and I was going into the ground so fast that I knew I just couldn't pull back because I would rip the wings off. So slowly I had to pull back and pull back and pull back, and all I could picture was doing a belly flop, on the runway.
Oh my gosh.
And obviously I did recover it, but the whole time the only thing I thought was, if I get killed, my mother's never going to forgive herself. That was a thing that just was the worst thing. So, those would have been catastrophes, but somehow I made it through it.
My dad was an Air Force pilot.
Oh, really?
And he flew F-111s, and we were actually in England, so like hearing you talk about England and stuff. And now he's a commercial airline pilot for Southwest Airlines. And I'm fascinated because he watches this show on
airplane disasters.
Yeah, airplane disasters.
I watch them all the time.
I'm like, Dad, you fly all the time.
No, you learn.
I
watch them all the time.
That's what he says. He's like, you learn what to do in this situation.
You become a better pilot. You start looking at things you didn't even think of could be a problem. That could be a problem.
I'm just fascinated.
Yeah.
These pilots watching airplane disasters. All right.
All the time.
I'm like, well, you guys just keep doing your thing then. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome, Colin.
John, it was awesome because when John Spence, when I told him you were going to be on the show, he said one thing. He goes, Joe's one of those few people that have said he's going to change the world and has actually done it. And I was like, man, that's just awesome. And I hope somebody can say something similar about me one day.
Sure. Well, I have a great team. So we all do it together.
Yeah, you guys are incredible. We'll keep it up. Thank you so much. Where can everybody find you? Social networks and stuff. What's the best way to connect?
Debbie, I know. Obviously, our website is ghfc.com.
Start there, and you can get to everywhere else.
Start there, yes, and you can make contact with any of us. My email address is Joe.Cirulli, Cirulli @ghfc.com.
Awesome.
So I'm going to tell you a quick thing. I was doing an interview for a guy, and I said, "Where are you?" He goes, "Rio de Janeiro." And so when we finished the interview, the first contact I got was from a 17-year-old Muslim in Sarajevo asking me about building a business. The second one I got was from Iceland. So anyway, it's pretty cool.
That's crazy.
So that's
awesome.
how you get me.
Yeah, that's
Okay?
awesome. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you
being here.
much.
Thanks for your
Thank you
impact.
very much.
Hey, everybody that's listening, I want to ask you to do me a big favor because I haven't asked for this yet. I want you to go leave us a review. We're on iTunes, Spotify, everywhere. But so on iTunes, you can leave a review. Leave a review, even if it's like terrible. If you think I'm terrible, then just tell me that I'm terrible and give me some like positive, like
Back
so
away
like
from the microphone.
give me like some feedback so I can learn. Don't just say, hey, Colin, you're terrible. Like if I'm terrible, then like
You're both-
tell me what I can do better.
You're both very good. You're both very good. You're not terrible.
Well, thank you. And please share this with somebody. Share this episode with somebody. Share any episode with anybody. We really want to grow this. We're going into year 2, baby. We're going into year 2. And don't forget to communicate. Talk with us on Instagram and Facebook. It's just at WHOA GNV on Instagram, and then it's / WHOA GNV podcast on Facebook. But if you communicate via Messenger or we're gonna answer, and you can hit me up directly. My Instagram is just Colin Austin, and hit me up directly. Say hello. I want to build relationships. I want to continue to further build this community. Thank you so much for listening. This is the WHOA GNV podcast, the podcast bringing you businesses and individuals that make you go, whoa. We will see you later.